You found the Backup Wrap-Up, your go-to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we get into something that should terrify every IT and security professional, polymorphic malware. This is the kind of malware that literally changes its own code, its signature, its behavior, even the IP addresses it talks to, just so your antivirus can't catch it. Dr. Mike Saylor joined Prasanna and me to break down how polymorphic malware works, why it's been so effective at evading detection, and what its scarier cousin, Metamorphic malware, can do that's even worse. Well, we also cover Waterhole attacks and what behavioral detection actually looks like in practice. If you thought your antivirus or anti-malware had it covered, this episode hopefully will change your mind and probably scare you a little bit. If you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years. That's right, 30 years. Ever since there were no backups of the production database that we just lost. So that's why I do this, because I don't want you to do that. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated backup admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Hi folks, wanted to mention my new book, Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery, which is now available for pre-order at Amazon.com. I wrote it with my co-author, Dr. Mike Saylor, who's a blue team cyber defense expert. He really knows his stuff. There are dozens of books to tell you how not to get ransomware. Our book starts with the assumption you're probably going to get ransomware. So we tell you how to respond to it and how to recover from it. It's unlike anything else out there. We tell you what you need to do now to be able to respond when it happens. We covered defenses to reduce the blast radius, how to protect your backup system, incident response procedures, negotiation strategies, backup recovery techniques, and how to prevent it from happening again. The tech reviewers gave it overwhelmingly positive feedback, so I think it's going to be a big seller. Pre-order it now, search for Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery, or just look for my name, W. Curtis Preston. Hope you like it. Welcome to the Backup Wrap-Up. I'm your host, W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and with me I have a guy that's starting to remind me of my wife, Prasanna Malaiyandi. How's it going, Prasanna?
So basically, I'm awesome because your wife is amazing, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what it was. That was what it was. I was just like, you were saying something. I was like, man, you're starting to sound like my wife, becoming very predictable, and how maybe the common thing
in fairness,
is me.
but yeah, because the last episode I was judgy McJudgy.
Yeah.
This time, though, but be honest, right? You knew I was going to ask something.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So you did it, but you didn't actually complete it.
Yeah, whatever.
So you failed.
Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, hi. We have also with us to watch our bickering, we have Dr. Mike Saylor, CEO of Black Swan Cybersecurity and co-author with me of this lovely book, Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery, that should ship any day now for anyone who wants to order it. And I believe the electronic version is already on its way out. Dr. Mike Saylor. How's it going, Mike?
Hey, everybody. Thank you.
All right.
Like a married couple. I think we need a third party to make judgment.
It happens sometimes. So, Mike, there's a phrase that you brought up a lot in the book, and so I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about it, to talk about what it is, why it matters, and is there anything we can do about it? And, of course, what we're talking about today is polymorphic ransomware, a.k.a. the shapeshifter. Do you want to start this out by talking about ViraLock? What was ViraLock, or is ViraLock, and how does that factor into this whole thing?
Sure, yeah. It was one of the most talked about polymorphic malware, but it functioned by compromising your computer with malware that had yet to be defined in a anti-malware, antivirus signature base or heuristics. So it was designed to look different, to behave different, so that it could survive the filters. And it was usually delivered in an attachment that you would expect. So if you worked in accounting, maybe it was an invoice. If you worked in the warehouse, maybe it was a shipping label. If you worked in the computer room or the mail room, maybe it was a PO or something like that. So it was designed so that you wouldn't suspect that attachment was malware or something unsolicited. But yeah, when you opened that attachment, it triggered the payload. The payload would drop and start to slowly or unsuspiciously deploy itself within the computer and start to then progress into the MITRE attack phases of reconnaissance and asset value identification, spreading, and those kind of things. So the polymorphic part of that was really designed so that, and backing up too. So a lot of antivirus software works on a schedule. So you can have the latest and greatest anti-malware and a ransomware software on your computer. There is a period of time between infection and detection. And some of that is analyzing how the software is behaving. Some of that is sending snippets of code or heuristics to the vendor, and they're going to sandbox it and do their analysis. And then it pushes that back out as an update. Until recently, those updates took about 7 to 10 days. So you could be infected with something that the antivirus has never seen before that could maintain persistence on that device for 7 to 10 days before the update comes. And that's why updates are important. The update comes, and now your antivirus says, hey, I found out that there's this thing on this computer. I need to clean it or quarantine it. So that's how it used to work. So now polymorphic code says, all right, now I know that on some periodic basis, I need to change the way I look and the way I behave. So that even if this antivirus, anti-malware detected how I was looking and behaving yesterday, the update that comes in isn't going to catch the way I look and behave today.
Interesting. So hence the term polymorphic, right? So morphic meaning changing and poly meaning many. So not only is it changing, it's changing multiple times in a single deployment. Would that be the right term?
We would call it a life. So that payload has a lifespan, and it would do these changes. And I think we're going to get into it in a little bit, but polymorphic code, it's hard coded in the malware how often to change the way it looks and behaves.
Could you go over what you mean by looks and behaves? Is it, oh, I'm just changing my extension or my location where I'm running? Maybe it's the footprint of the malware itself, or is there like significant parts of the malware that change while it's
Changing changing the extension or the file type or even some of the consumable content is somewhat irrelevant to antivirus, anti-malware. Those tools are looking for file type headers, the flags that say, even though it says it's a text file, it's an executable file. Really what the polymorphic code is doing is changing the signature of the malware. And it doesn't take much. For example, if I install malware and it's hard-coded to communicate back to a command and control server at a particular IP address, that is part of the signature now of that malware. And so when the update comes, and a malware is going to go, hey, that file contains that IP address for a known bad command and control, and we're going to quarantine it. So what the malware is hard-coded to do is say, use that IP address for the first 72 hours, and then change it to this other IP address, increment by 1 or 10 or some math, and that will coincide with the threat actors changing their lease on the command and control server, or they build a new one. And so that's an example of how that antivirus update is going to miss the change that this malware made to how it behaves.
Gotcha. So it isn't necessarily, as an example, changing out the underlying, say, on a Windows system, DLLs that it's leveraging or other things like.
Oh, it could, for sure. Notepad Plus is in the news. And so maybe it's using Notepad Plus and some of the related file structures and support files that are associated with Notepad Plus. And that helps it do the first day or two worth of activity. And then it changes its behavior to start using the DLLs in Microsoft Calculator, or or maybe from the command and control, it downloads additional modules. And so now the file structure or the malware itself has changed. It's no longer a 150 kilobyte file. Now it's a megabyte file. And because we've added stuff to it, it's been rewritten. So now all the metadata has changed. And there's any number of examples. Just get creative on how you can modify how a file looks and behaves. And bad guys are doing that because antivirus, in a lot of cases, most cases, those signatures are point in time things. And so you've got a period of time to operate as malware before those signatures get updated. There's even malware that detects based on it'll detect what antivirus you're using and behave differently based on that. So if you've got Trend Micro versus ESET versus McAfee or some CrowdStrike, it will identify that first and then behave accordingly based on the antivirus capabilities and update schedules.
Let's go back to when you were talking about ViraLock. One of the things I read about it was that it would send a document that you were expecting, but change it so that it was actually an executable. And this is going to happen a lot. But that seems like something that the average person wouldn't fall for. You're changing invoice.doc to invoice.doc.exe, and then people are going to click on that anyway.
Some people just don't realize it, and some people are just very busy, right? So I've got to get through 100 invoices today, and there's another invoice, right? So they're just trying to do their job. And so, yeah, very often bad guys, again, are taking advantage of human nature, right? We're too busy to be diligent.
Especially when you're like, hey, I expected that sort of document to come here. And
I'm going to ask a dumb question. In Windows, does it have to have .exe to be an executable? I know there's DLLs, but doesn't it have to have .exe to actually be an executable, or can it just run with anything?
So there are a few file types like self-expanding containers, like a zip or a tarball. So there's a couple. And it doesn't have to say exe in order to execute like an exe. Because again, I can call a file whatever. I can call it a DLL, and it'll look like a DLL because Windows is associating the file extension with what it thinks is necessary to open that file. So that's why that icon changes. But if you double click on it, Windows goes, hey, wait, I thought it was a DLL or a text file, and I'm opening what I think is associated with that file type, and it's not working. So file corrupted, file not readable, whatever, because I just changed the extension. But if you look at the file itself in the binary, there's actually file type flags and headers that identify it as an executable. So you just have to know how to address that file as an executable without double clicking.
What I'm hearing you say is if you double click on it, it's got the wrong extension, it's not going to do the thing you want it to do, but there is a way to run it. Okay. All right.
So if I think, though, about polymorphic ransomware, isn't a lot of ransomware implementations where you're downloading modules from command and control servers, wouldn't all of those fall under this classification?
No. So traditional, or we would call it static, and correct me if I misunderstood your question, but all of the additional, so there is the point of polymorphic or metamorphic, which I think we'll get to in a minute, is to evade detection. And built in there is also sometimes a capability of disabling antivirus because we're now resident on the machine and we can escalate privileges and issue commands, especially, and there's vulnerabilities disclosed recently of pretty elementary ways of disabling Windows Defender, as an example. So there's that. Then all the other files I call down are just adding to my base executable. And so it's not my executable plus 5 other files. It's my base executable that's creating a new executable, and in a lot of cases, cleaning up after myself.
Gotcha. It's always evolving, if you will.
Yep. And one other thing to add about ViraLock is that made it a little different is that as it infected other files, it replicated itself. So it wasn't just ransomware, it was also a virus. And so you could let's say you paid the ransom and you decrypted all your files. Now all those files still have the virus in them and could very well just become reinfected or communicable now among others that you might share those files with.
Communicable. Now, you brought up the term metamorphic code. How is metamorphic versus polymorphic?
So polymorphic is primarily hard-coded changes. This is going to happen in 24 hours. This is going to change from this to that. Metamorphic does its own, like almost AI analysis of what needs to change, and it does it when it thinks it's necessary. So metamorphic is actually a lot more scary than polymorphic.
Interesting. And is there an understanding of like how common either of those two types are?
Polymorphic's probably pretty common because that's just easy to do. Metamorphic is like nation state CIA scary stuff. So probably pretty prevalent. We just don't know about it.
Do you have an example of a metamorphic ransomware attack out there? And it's okay if you don't, off the top of your head.
I don't.
Okay.
Okay.
When, like, nothing like ViraLock, like not a tool like ViraLock?
I'll keep thinking about it as we talk, but I've got
Would
scenarios in
Stuxnet
mind
be-
without necessarily any identifiable names to put on it.
With the Stuxnet, which is the one that
Nope,
did this?
Stuxnet was hard-coded.
Okay, so that was polymorphic.
Even like some of the other ransomware, like that hit Target, it was hard-coded to look for point-of-sale systems. It would move from one asset to the other, clean up after itself, behave a little different, hard-coded.
Yeah, I could just see the malware like crawling through the thing. Are you a point of sale system? Nope. Bye.
I have a conceptual example of metamorphic code, and it was called the Frankenstein virus. It was developed, I'm having trouble remembering his name, but it was developed out of the University of Texas at Dallas.
Oh,
And essentially what it would do is a framework would be downloaded that completely harmless. Like nothing would think this framework was an issue at all. But as this framework executed, it would look for resources. It would feed off the land. So what software, what applications, what DLLs do you have on this computer? And it would assemble its malware based on what's available to it.
that's crazy.
So that would be an example of metamorphic, but I don't think that made it out of the lab.
Yeah, and I'm guessing with a lot of the AI stuff, we might see more of this in the future.
Yeah.
Yep.
Making mean people smarter by being stupid. Something in the research that came up, something called the Waterhole attack. Mike, is that relevant in this discussion?
It is. And so it's similar to that one-to-many strategy that bad guys have. What's my least level of effort that results in the largest possible gain? And looking for opportunities to attack victims in how they collaborate. So Microsoft Teams, Zoom, WebEx, Slack, SharePoint, all of those are what we would consider water holes. We go to those things to interact with coworkers, update documents, share documents, store documents. So if I can compromise that water hole, then I've got a larger pool of potential victims. If I can infect that one file in SharePoint that everybody here's the timesheet template or the expense template, right? I'm going to go infect that. So now everybody downloads that to do their timesheets and their expenses, and I'm infecting everybody that opens that template.
Is that because they're using like macros? Is that what you're talking about there?
Could be macros. It could be polymorphic code. It could be ViraLocker on your timesheet template.
It's just something that a whole bunch of people are accessing.
Right.
Yep.
That's interesting. You want to talk about the things that a polymorphic piece of code does to make sure that it continues to live?
Yeah. So, the life of polymorphic is somewhat known depending on the antivirus that you use. And so some of the older traditional ones, that code is only going to live for a couple of weeks.
Only a couple of weeks while malware is running wild in your environment.
And I'll add to that single deployment of that code is a couple of weeks. But really what happens in the real world is that code will likely establish access that then can be multiplied into different threads. And so here's another example of a red teaming exercise that we did. And this is an example of that coordinated effort among different attack skill sets. So one of the guy on our team, our chief engineer, knew how to write malware. I know how to break into buildings and social engineer people. Another guy is on our team. We call him the ghost because no one ever remembers seeing him. So very good social engineer, but also very technical. So he and I together infiltrated a physical building, social engineered employees as if we were from IT. So I was dressed like this with a shirt and tie. And so I was the IT manager, and he just had a polo shirt on and with slacks. And so he was the IT engineer. And together I had my cup of coffee and my clipboard. And together we presented a level of legitimacy and confidence. And we just started asking people, hey, before you leave today, it looks like you're getting ready to leave. We just need to run an inventory application on your machine because we're doing some upgrades to make things work better. We all want things to work better. I don't need your password or anything. I just don't log off yet. With their current session active, plug in a self-deploying USB drive that would create a reverse shell from that workstation all the way back to our chief engineer sitting at the hotel saying, all right, got one, move to the next desk. And so that malware and that thread lived on that computer for a week. But we would do that 20 to 50 times. And the reason you do that persistence, that multi-threaded persistence, is because antivirus and most computers don't all do the same thing at the same time. So a week from now, when antivirus signatures update to catch our malware, we would see those persistent threads start to drop, right? But because we have access to that computer, we've already got the next payload ready. And so we deploy our next payload to one of those active threads, and then it spreads backwards to the other machines that were previously compromised. So now we get our threads back because we managed to change the signature of our malware. And so even though the malware may only last a week or two, because I have access to the environment, I just need to deploy a fresh copy that the antivirus hasn't seen before and restart the clock on another week or two.
So it's basically like trying to play whack-a-mole. So as someone who's trying to defend against this, what do you do? Like, it seems like you're never going to stay ahead of them. So,
but all of those things are identifiable if you have a baseline. The way that malware works, if you have a baseline, you can start to look for deviations from that baseline. So that's your perimeter, IP addresses you're connected to, data volume, network protocols being used,
file access patterns,
ingress, egress, file integrity. So who touched it? What did they do? Network and endpoint behavior, user behavior, all of those things you can baseline and start to track deviations if you have the right tools. And bad guys know a lot of people don't have the tools. And even if you did, there's a subset of people that do that they don't look at it 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about that engagement I was describing where we deployed all that ransomware, we did a ton of different things. We had 12 objectives to achieve, and they gave us like 180 days to achieve 12 objectives. We achieved 11 objectives in 7 days.
Wow.
And then we spent the rest of the time helping them identify the problems and fix the problems. But one of the problems, and this goes back to the behavior, is because we had access, and one of our objectives was to exfiltrate a lot of data, and we decided to do a little bit to achieve the objective and then do a lot to see how much it would take to get caught. And in the debrief, we were talking to the firewall admin and said, look, do you review your firewall logs and your bandwidth? He's like, yeah, every morning I come in. I said, okay, the other day we pegged your bandwidth. What did you think about that? He said, I thought it was weird. But then the next day when I came in and it was still pegged, I just thought it was normal. Yeah, I can't help you, buddy.
So what you're talking about there is shifting from pattern, like file pattern recognition to behavioral recognition.
I'm not shifting to it, but adding. So security is all about layers. How many things can I put between me and the bad guys so that I can identify things faster and respond faster before they get to what they want or they spread? And so, yeah, it's like when I build a house, do I just need a yard? It'd be nice to have a sidewalk and a curb and maybe a fence, right? So it's all those things that are going to help me determine when someone comes off the street towards my house.
So it can detect things like it can detect just weird stuff, like you talked about a mass upload of traffic. It could also obviously detect a lot of encryption going on. What other kinds of things might it notice?
It could also be over the last 6 months, Curtis does not work after 6 p.m. He does not log in. Or if he does, this is what he does. He has this behavior during this period of time and this behavior during another period of time. And that could be during the day. It could be the weekends. You open Microsoft Word. You open the internet. But today, you opened Excel and Notepad, and you went to 50 websites. And those
from Notepad.
Those could all be harmless activities,
right,
but they will be flagged as a deviation from normal behavior. And that's how you get ahead of malware. Not because it's identified as truly suspect, it's identified as a deviation.
I don't work after 4, by the way, just for the record.
Well,
so, Mike, I know in one of the previous points you discussed sort of these tools. Curtis, I think at some point we're going to have a podcast episode maybe talking about some of these tools.
Yeah, of the various tools, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't cover everything in one episode or even 10 episodes. It's a lot to cover. So in this topic of polymorphic ransomware and also metamorphic ransomware, can you think of anything that we haven't covered that you think is important?
So one of the things that is important to security, cybersecurity specifically, because cybersecurity impacts everything. If it turns on and has value, cybersecurity there's a risk to it. So we're also limited from a defense perspective by our resources. So that's time, money, tech, people, right? And so one of the things that's very important to an organization or even individuals is identify those things that are really valuable, where they are, and invest more in protecting that thing, and then start to pull away from that to add layers as resources become available. But if you don't identify or you don't know where the important things are, and you just decide to blanket cover everything, if you had 100 computers and your budget's $1,000, and that's $10 a computer, 9 out of 10 of those aren't as important, and you could have invested more in capabilities and recoverability in that one computer, and do the kind of the bare minimum, good hygiene on the others. But then segmentation, hardening, good policy, good monitoring, good response, have a response plan, good backups.
What I'm hearing, though, is just like in backup and recovery, we talk about not everything is the same from a recovery perspective. There are applications that have a much higher business value and much higher business criticality, and so you're not going to back up Joe's laptop the same way you back up the primary database server. And it sounds like the same is true of cybersecurity.
It is. And so, yeah, your retention, classification, or even identification, it's all risk-based, value-based approach to applying resources to protect what you think is the most valuable. What's going to keep your organization running, and how fast can we recover if something bad happens?
All right. Mike, thank you for continuing to contribute to my cyber depression.
Hey, don't pull your hair out.
Yeah. Too late.
What
Too
hair?
Late. Yeah. Prasanna. Oh, dude, that was hurtful right there at the end. Anyway, thanks, Prasanna.
You're welcome.
And thank you to the listeners. That is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.